Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you joined us for this special episode, The Beauty of Broken Places, How Suffering Reshapes Marriage with award-winning writer, helper, poet, as well as Professor Kimberly Phinney. She's an Enneagram 9 and a 9-1 pairing, and she has such giftedness in this space, not only from her own suffering, but just because she is that 9 who can see the suffering of others so well and is so vulnerable and emotional to share with us today about what it's like to have chronic issues in marriage, we truly can love one another in sickness and health and lean on each other and trust one another, as well as have the realism around the groundedness of life cannot always be sunshine and romances. Guys, you're in for a treat as you hear from her about the deep, hard, dark spaces of marriage and even the redemption that can be found in and around them. Kimberly has walked this story out herself. And as you know, she is already an award-winning writer. You're going to see in the show notes, and she'll talk about it as well. Her beautiful blog space with so many pieces, the way back to ourselves with the number 2. And she is so all over the place. I love how many spaces she's been featured. She's been featured on Good Morning America, ABC News. She's a Pushcart Prize nominated poet, award-winning author, Christianity Today. So many other places she's been featured as well. Has a beautiful team, and her The Way Back to Ourselves. There are so many more pieces you're going to get there. So head over there during this episode, after this episode, connect with her on Instagram where you'll see she is as well. And I'm just grateful you're here with us for this moment so you can settle in and just allow yourself to know we are going to go deep and we're going to have some fun too. As we get there, I'll tell you for today's Marriage Minute, it made me process some of my clients who have walked through some very big things together. Even this one from over a decade ago, it was a moment to really behold when I saw this couple really not only cry together, but pray together and hope together and dream together after the wife's illness. And I don't want to share what it was or any more about them, but just to put this on myself, put this with my clients that I've walked through things like this. I want to encourage you, you too can be brave in your deepest, darkest, hardest moments of suffering physically. I've been so privileged to walk with clients through this. And I know Kimberly is now in that helping space saying the same. She's walked through many students with this and her own journey. And this is going to help you to walk with others through their pain and find the deepest places together. So I'm grateful and I want to make room for her and all she has to share with us. So in this midweek episode, I'm just sending you right there with the reminder of everything we have for you is in the show notes. So you don't forget that. But right now, just head into this beautiful conversation with Kimberly. Thank you so much for sharing in this time with us. I hope you had a beautiful experience as you got to peek into somebody's hard story, but also see the landing places that Kimberly has found for herself so that she knows she's held by her creator, by her husband, and by her community who loves her no matter what, too. And I want us to be that kind of community as well, where there can be vulnerability and safety to share what's really going on. So please know that we're doing that work together, and I'm excited for that with you. And I thank you for doing this work with me too. We'll talk to you soon. Grab everything of Kimberly's from the show notes, and thanks for being here. Kimberly, we are so thrilled to get this chance to meet with you on the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Krista. I'm so glad that Tanner Olson put us in contact with each other, and I'm really excited to come back to podcast guesting with you after taking some time off with my health. So this is a wonderful, warm place to be.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, that just blesses us to hear. And today we're going to be talking about why you had to take a break and just really thankful that you're allowing yourself to also just notice together with our audience that we can be real and authentic together, right? We don't have to pretend
Absolutely.
everything's perfect all the time.
Absolutely. I'm here for it because
Yay.
that is my
Okay.
MO.
Yes. And as I shared before you got on, you are a fabulous writer. You are going to tell us, I hope, a little bit about your writing and awards and also just your Enneagram type. You know, everyone is here for that. And I'll ask questions too.
Okay. I love it. I am ready to buckle up and let's do this.
Okay. Perfect. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm late to this second chapter in life because I spent my first 20 years as a public servant in education, working with secondary ed kids, primarily 17 and 18-year-olds. So I
Wow.
worked with inner city at-risk youth for the first 10, and then the second 10, I was at a small Christian school and I was the English department head there. And that's when I had my miracle daughter. Because I do have aggressive stage 4 endometriosis. I'm in remission, and
Yeah.
it actually almost took my life because it was so severe. And then we had surgical complications, and I got sepsis.
Oh my God.
And it is a really long story, but the bird's eye view, so your readers can kind of get a gist of like where I'm coming from and
Yeah.
why I do what I do, is that I've had 4 intense surgeries and been put into a wheelchair in my bed on multiple occasions over the past 5 years.
Wow.
And so the fallout is so complicated.
Mm.
But I am up and going. It's a daily, grind. That you have
Mhm.
to bring it to the foot of the cross. You have to lean on your faith system.
Yes.
So that caused me to have to leave the classroom
Mm.
where I was teaching English and serving others,
Yeah.
which was devastating. And I actually felt a little bit angry and even resentful when people would say, "Oh, this is going to be your testimony."
Mm.
Because when you're spending day after day in bed and you're losing everything, you're like, I
Mm.
don't want to hear that. And
Yeah.
how could that even possibly be true? And this is coming
Yes.
from someone who was a devout Christian. So I
Yeah.
really do like to speak into that space. And that's where the writing was birthed.
Mm.
Um, because I always was one. And that's another story for another day of how it went
Totally.
away and came back, et cetera. But
Wow.
through coming out of sepsis, which was the darkest part, which was
Mhm.
between my second and third surgery, where it was very touch and go. I'm a mother to like I said, I had a miracle
Yeah.
baby, and she
Yeah.
was little. She still is, but she was little at the time. And so my husband, God bless him, was juggling all of it. And when I started to come out of the clouds, or I should probably say the dark,
Yeah.
the writing came back in a brand new way as
Mm.
I was using it to survive. I never set out to write a book. I mean, that was all God's hand, and it's wild that I'm about to publish my second one now.
Mm.
So, yeah, I write, and then in a fever dream when I had sepsis, the antibiotics are pumping through my arm. I'm being hospitalized multiple times, and then I spent about, I think, a month or 6 weeks completely bedridden on our couch with the antibiotics pumping through me.
Wow.
And I had this fever dream, and I kept on saying, I want to get back to ourselves, that there's got to be a way back. And I would say that to my husband, like, how do we get back from this?
Oh
The way
wow.
back to ourselves. And I was feeling that culturally as well. And
Mm.
so, all of this to say, by the hand of God, I founded in the middle of, I had COVID after that.
Oh my
So I was
word.
back in bed several months later, just really unwell. And I said to my husband, bring me my computer.
Mhm.
He knows I'm crazy and he loves me anyway. He's like,
Aw.
really? That's what you want right now? I said, yes. I said, you know that thing I've been talking about? I'm making a website. And I've said this story before. Even if 50 people read it, that is so redeeming to me right now. I just need something. And
Yes.
so I did do that. And I
Oh,
listened to the Lord, and it looked crazy.
yeah.
And now, so that was August of 2022. So what are we, 2.5 years from there? And the way back to ourselves with number2.com is our literary community, and it has blown up by the hand of God. So,
That's
and then I,
incredible.
yeah, and then I teach English now as a professor online part time.
Mm.
So I'm home with my daughter, trying to heal, teaching online, connecting online, talking to you, writing, and just whatever it is that God lets me do in that day, that's what I do. And
Mm.
sometimes it is sleeping and resting and just holding my daughter and crying to my husband.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So,
I
yeah,
love that you are so honoring to God as well as just surprised. You could just see your surprise. Like, I never would have chosen this
still,
movie. And yet there's so
it's,
many beautiful moments in it.
I
Wild.
know it's both and living, which I like to talk about a lot in writing.
Love that. The juxtaposition, the both and. You're
Yes.
a beautiful writer. You've been on Good Morning America. You've had so many different people recognize your writing. I love seeing that.
Thank you.
Wow. And tell us your Enneagram types too for those who are just learning about you.
Okay, so I am a 9 in my heart all the way with a very strong one wing.
Mm.
Um, so they battle with each other a lot
Yeah.
because what I want so badly is peace and equanimity, and I want everybody getting along, and I want things to just, I'm like Pooh Bear, that's the joke
Yeah.
in the family home,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just, my daughter says, but it's not honey pots, it's poetry books, isn't that cute from my
Yes.
8-year-old? Um,
Yes.
but my one will just like get nagging,
Yeah.
make things perfect, you
Yeah.
know, um, tidy up this business of grief. And you know, the one is beautiful, powerful thing because they're justice warriors, and I do that too. So I
Yeah.
can feel that tug with it,
Mhm.
because that part of me just wants to tuck in. Um, as my good friend Jody Grubbs says, who wrote Live Slowly, to kind of tuck in, and keep things
Mhm.
comfortable and cozy, especially after everything that we are going through. But then there's that righteous, strong, one that wants to,
Mhm.
do things and do things the right way and the perfect way. So that's me.
Oh my gosh. And I love how you're noticing that your nine gives you permission to rest, but your one
Yes.
gets you moving. I hear you saying that and both of these actually have a lot of deep justice fighting. I don't know if you know that, but nine, one, and eight are all extremely powerful justice fighters. So you have that duality, but the one, as you know, is literally the doer of the whole personality, world that God created. And so you're saying that has kept you probably editing, getting the sharp details, kept you
Yes.
moving. You can do this, girl. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And what is even more interesting is my husband is a one
Oh,
with a strong wing
yeah.
too. So there are things that we align with
Mm.
quite sharply. But then at the same time, as you know, when
Mhm.
two ones are on fire together, you can really, it's like, who's the boss? So, you
Right.
know, um, it's what makes me so drawn to him because he's the smartest person I know, and he's
Oh,
so passionate, intellectual, and fiery, and alpha, and all the things.
yeah.
Very, very righteous, sees things for what they are.
Oh,
And then a little bit of times my nine gets a little exhausted,
yeah. Yes, I hear
where I'm
you.
like,
Yes.
okay, let's put this away because I
Yeah.
just need to go curl up and be complacent for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes he probably needs that without you guys knowing why God put you
Oh,
together too.
yes.
There's no one more than a one wing two who is running hard and fast. And
He
so,
runs so hard and
oh
fast.
gosh,
And he's a
yeah.
giver and a doer. And he even will get so exhausted and he'll finally sit on the couch. And I'm like, my nine comes up to him and says, do nothing.
Yeah.
Like, you're allowed to do nothing right now. And then within an hour, he gets a little restless
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
his one, two is just charging. Like, what can I do? How can I serve? What can I get done around the house? And
Wow.
his job, he's a project manager for a international medical company. He is paid to be an amazing one.
Oh
So
my
he comes
God.
home and I'm just like, put it away. It's
Oh,
okay now. You can rest.
wow. Oh my gosh. What a gentle discovery he made when he found you. How did you guys meet, by the way?
So we met each other when I was 15 and he was 17. I was a freshman in high school when we were friends, and he was a senior. And we ended up going to the same church. We went to the same high school, but freshmen and seniors don't
Yeah.
run together,
Yeah, true.
nor should they. Um,
Yes.
Teaching high school, yes, I have that opinion that, the age gap there means a lot at that age.
Yeah, it does.
But we were friends and we were in youth group together
Yeah.
and clearly just friends and just connecting and very deep thinker. And he lived over in Europe during his formative years because of Air Force. He's an Air Force brat.
Oh.
And so he was very interesting when he finally moved back to the States at 17. He was interesting to me. And
Mm,
then now knowing the one thing, it makes sense because I could see this in him.
mm,
Maybe he didn't see it himself. So I really pulled that out of him. Like my one was speaking to his one, like
yeah.
get focused on school,
Mm,
because he was really just trying to work through his own things and some things that have happened in his past and some of his own pain and
mm,
finding direction. And at that age, I was very, you know, driven at that
mm.
point. I was leaning in my one a lot more than my nine.
Wow.
I came to know my nine as I got older, I think.
Mm.
And so we really clicked. And then when I was a senior in high school, we realized that this was a lot more.
Oh,
He kept on dating the wrong people. I was dating the
yeah.
wrong people.
Yeah.
And he was a little bit of a bad boy. I was, more of the
Mm.
bookish good girl. So he got on that
Mm.
that straight and narrow path.
Oh, I love.
And so we started getting serious when I think I was 17. And so
Mm.
we've been married 20 years this year.
Oh my word. I love hearing that. Congratulations. That's
Yeah, thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that is a gorgeous story. And I love how you also, in some of the samples of your poetry I've seen on websites, you write about that nostalgia and going back. And I know nines are famous for going back, but one thing that I think is so beautiful about you and your work is that any nines listening, which there's a lot of nine listeners here, maybe more than any other type, they are so inspired, I think, to know that you can go deep. You can talk about the melancholy, the despair. Can you tell us about that? Just your poetry, your counseling, like what gave you permission as a happy-go-lucky, positive nine to feel like you could talk about this or that you would even talk about the harder parts of life?
Yeah, and you know what? Again, I think I was slow to come to that
Okay.
through my own trauma.
Mm.
And actually, The Drama of the Gifted Child was a book that
Oh,
awakened me to my own
God.
trauma.
Yes.
And the idea of giftedness, not necessarily speaking to IQ, although some of these people who have risen above do,
Yeah.
but it was more the giftedness of survival. And
Hmm.
I woke up to my own self. I think reading Henri Nouwen helped me. So it's really been a journey that I was able to go to the depths with myself.
Wow.
And then being able to do that, it allowed me to do that with other people. I
Interesting.
do love how you've talked about how the nines can kind of tap into everyone else. I am an extreme empath
Mm.
and
Okay.
teaching and the highly sensitive person, I get like 100% on those quizzes. I'm just
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm like the poster child for the HSP. But
Yeah.
that served me really well teaching. I think that's what
Mhm.
also helped me to go the depths because when
Mhm.
you're caring for teenagers, 17, 18, there is so much going on.
Yes.
And they ended up coming. I mean, I ended up counseling kids unexpectedly more
Mm.
than I was even like grading papers sometimes. Like I would sit
Oh,
down and go, okay, I have to grade these essays. Like I'm under this tight deadline. And then there would be a knock at my door. And
yeah.
there's a kid with tears, Miss Finney, this, Miss Finney, that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
they say little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. And
Yeah.
I mean, they would come to talk to me about suicide attempts, their friend that was feeling suicidal,
Yeah. Mm.
being in relationships with someone who might have been abusive. How do they navigate that?
Yeah.
Thinking about are they ready to have sex with their boyfriend or not? And
Wow.
this was, not only is that in public, but it's
Mm.
also something that happens in private school. And so being there for them and saying there's nothing that you're going to say that's going to scare me
Yeah.
that will change how I love you
Mm.
and care for you, that you can tell me anything and we will figure out how to get you help.
Mm.
And
Wow.
that equipped me a lot.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So,
And that goes so hand in hand with the nine being able to see all perspectives, the placement.
mhm.
Also, you named a book from my grad school days, and I know you have now had your psychology grad school days as well as your English.
Yes, I'm in the thick of it.
Yeah, yes. And the drama of the gifted child is something that I think a lot of nines might like because it's been a while, but I believe that's a book about even numbing and all the trauma of childhood, which probably a lot of nines go through. Is that right?
Right. I think so. And also that from my understanding, I'm not the authority on the subject, you are. So let me know if I'm
Mm.
like in the neighborhood, but nines do fall asleep to things. We kind of can numb or try to like, we want our peace so much that we're willing to like sweep things under the rug that absolutely need to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I actually learned I was a nine,
Oh,
is these
wow.
past several years going through that,
Mm.
and realizing that the thing that I cannot have taken from me after going through so much trauma is my peace.
Mm.
As much as I want justice and I want things to be honest,
Yeah.
all of those things that the one wants. I
Yeah.
can still go to bed at night if something doesn't go off perfectly. Does it drive me nuts? Yes, I'm a one wing. But
Yeah.
if I'm not at peace with my husband, or if I'm worried about my daughter, or if I'm concerned about something like with what's going on with my mom, or
Mm.
uh, even a friend, I can just become quite obsessive. That's what's going to keep me up at night. And that's how I knew that
Mm.
I was a nine. And the drama of the gifted child definitely makes you realize, oh my gosh, I have been sleepwalking to
Yeah.
these really important parts of myself. And the big thing I learned was how disembodied I became and
Mm.
how that led to just depression and
Mm.
anxiety and just all, all kinds of health issues that I probably didn't help. I'm not blaming myself, but
No.
I didn't help it either.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's such an honoring way to say it because with each personality type, sometimes you see things that are thematic. And I can't remember one I recently said to my husband, I wouldn't share it on my podcast, even if I did, because it was like that. It was like I never wanted to blame this personality type for that, but it's something I keep noticing. And
Yeah,
similarly, like you're saying, when you're like, this could be part of my nine, but I was certainly not blaming nines for this. It's just, I love how you just said, but it certainly wasn't helping. So that way, when we're doing our psychological and mental health work here, we can say you're only going to get healthier with it. So I love that. It's a
yes,
better way to say it versus, like you said, like this could this be somebody's fault or like, these
right.
existential questions that are way too big for us, and judgy.
Yeah.
But
And
you
sometimes they don't really help anything, you
Right,
know.
right. It's such a guest. So tell me about, we're going to talk about suffering, and I think that's so valuable as we talked before we got on, but every one of us will suffer, has suffered, and you have so much to say about that. But before we do, because of your counseling work, I just wanted to ask on a personal level, along with the drama of the gifted child recommendation we can make, what would you say about internal family systems? We've talked a bit about that on this podcast as part of a lens for your own healing journey.
So, in all of my studies, IFS, internal family systems, is one of my favorite, not only because I love its therapeutic values, but
Yeah.
because it was life-saving for me. So,
Mm,
before I ever got chronically ill, like I was dealing with my health problems, I struggled with mental health, depression,
mhm.
anxiety. I
Yeah.
had GAD, which is like generalized anxiety disorder. And
Yeah.
I was just desperate. This is pre getting my doctorate, or I should say earning, because I'm at the tail end of it with my dissertation. But this
Yeah.
is me
Oh,
being an English teacher and having my master's and my bachelor's in English. I'm just trying to do all this self-help, and counseling, trying to work through some trauma from my past. This is all pre-physical illness, have you?
yeah.
And I somehow got put on to Boundaries for Your Soul by
Mm,
Allison Cook and Kimberly Miller,
yeah. Oh.
which is a Christian perspective on IFS.
Mm,
And so I was recommended it. I can't remember. I was talking to someone that I had just read Boundaries, the popular book by Cloud.
yeah.
And they said, well, have you heard of this one? And I said, no, you
Hmm.
have to get it, because they knew me. They knew how, me being that sensitive nine and
Yeah.
struggling. So I got it, and it was ground shaking for me, like earth shaking, ground shattering. I read it again. It changed my internal framework. And then I just kept on giving it to all of my girlfriends who are struggling. I'd be like mailing them that book. So I had a love affair with IFS before I studied officially with my
Yeah.
doctorate. And then, of course, within my doctorate has been a huge focus in my research. And I think it is extremely powerful. I feel there's so much to say, but
Mm,
I think what is beautiful about it is recognizing that we have parts within ourselves, and
mm,
some of them are healthy and we're aware of them, and some of them we've exiled
yeah.
and we have attached shame to them. And
Hmm.
as long as we respond to those parts with our shame, or like Martha Beck calls it, the everybody committee, where
Mm,
these other voices in our head are chiming in that are creating this shame story.
yeah.
We can't heal those parts. We can't find those exiles. We can't reconcile with them. And so we're going to be battling within ourselves. And I think what's beautiful about internal family systems, especially from a Christian perspective, is to have the spirit led self,
Mm,
which is, Christ or God at the center, going into those places where the exiles exist and saying, like, I see you.
yeah.
I'm ready to listen to you.
Mm,
I know it's been hard. You're frightened, you're scared, you're angry, whatever it is. And I'm ready to listen to this part so it can become fully integrated.
Mm.
So for me, it was that anxious child. And I had to find her and recognize those parts and then learn to self-soothe myself. And so I just think it's so powerful.
Mm. Mm. Oh my gosh. And you just named it. To do that on your own is hard. And it's
Very.
really not as always what we need to do as Christians. We can let God be with us. And we do know the
Yes.
Enneagram 9 can go to that sixth space quite a lot of
Yes.
me. And
I
so
have hung
you
out with
were,
the six area.
yeah, yeah, you were like, I'm GAD. I'm just, there I am. And it was home. And that because stress happens every day. So you're going there in stress all the time. And so now you have
Absolutely.
self-soothing tools and you've worked on so much. And now you have things you can do if and when these darker feelings and moments arise. And you also bring your poetry to it.
Yes.
So did poetry start for you in those early days of your passions with teaching English and writing as a child? Or did you bring that in more after this epiphany and this fever dream when you were thinking about the way back to ourselves?
That is such a good question. So I'll again take a very long story and make it short and bite
Aw,
size.
aw.
Um, I remember getting the writing fever, I've said, when I was about 8. So my daughter's 8 right now, so that feels kind of special. She just turned 8. And I
Aw.
wrote this story about a girl who found a cheetah in her woods and tamed it. So I said, even since a young age, I wanted to tame wild things. I think
Yeah.
that's the one in us,
Beautiful.
right?
Yeah, I think you got that.
And
That's awesome.
shortly after, probably in my preteens, early teens, I did start to write poetry, and it just felt like an impulse.
Mm.
And so I filled countless journals between around 13 and 14, just all the way through my 20s. Um, just writing, writing, writing. And then, of course, you start to become a teacher of teenagers when you're like 22, 23,
Yeah, you're
and
so
they're
young.
17 and 18. And it was quite consuming. I continued,
Mm.
but I really felt like the Lord was calling me to be that public servant. And I was very like all consumed by teaching. So
Yeah.
writing became, something in the background that I was always doing, but it wasn't something I was like actively pursuing. And then we had infertility issues for a really long time. I couldn't get pregnant, and then I had miscarriages.
Yeah.
Our daughter's a total miracle, as I've said.
Yeah.
But before we had her, like we're talking 8, 9, 10, 11 years before we did,
Wow.
I was like, I guess I'm never going to have children, so I want to lean into this writing dream. So I went for a MFA, and it was a very unpleasant experience trying to be a Christian in
Oh,
a very different kind of setting. But it was hard, but also I learned things. So I've made peace with it, and it was God's timing. So I
yeah.
joked I was an MFA dropout. It was
Mm.
all meant to be because shortly after I got pregnant with my miracle daughter.
Oh my.
And because that experience was so tough,
Yeah.
and then I had her, I was like, "Oh God, I think I misunderstood your calling on my life. You want me to live this very small life with my daughter,
Yeah.
teaching." The writing thing blew up in my face. And so I was like hurt by that, and then turning to this miracle, and I'm like, okay, this all makes sense. I'm
Mm.
just going to teach, forget about these dreams,
Yeah.
and focus on my daughter and my husband and all of that.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, I got extremely ill and lost all
Mm.
of the things.
Mm.
And that's when the writing came back. And it's really wild because now I look back and I can see the hand of God
Mm.
through it all.
Wow.
Why there are false starts, why we stay somewhere too long, why
Mm.
you have to endure Job like moments, why you are attacked like Saul, went
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
David, um,
Mm.
why you become ill, all of those things, they're awful in themselves, but with the Lord, they're like extremely redeemable.
Mm.
And that's what I'm kind of seeing. And that's where I arrived at the both and living is
Mm.
that, gosh, this is such a curse in itself, what's happened. I can't have more children. I've lost friendship job,
Mm.
a job I loved, a community I loved. But then look what the Lord is doing,
Mm.
you know, and that you can't argue with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really both and living. I love how
Ugh,
you show us that shape in your life, how you allowed yourself to submit to God in that way, even though you knew there's, of course, like Jonah, no other choice. People still make other choices and they don't listen and they don't lean in. And I hear you saying, I've had moments, I will have moments just because I'm human where that will be hard. But leaning into God and seeing what else He's had for me has been so redemptive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where the spiritual muscle comes in now for me that I have to flex, and practice is, the days I spend in bed now. And listen, I am a mess too. I'm a beautiful mess for the Lord.
Yeah.
I will cry and things, but I am getting good at pulling myself back up, you
Mm.
know,
Mhm.
focusing on the beauty from ashes and knowing, yep, I might have some hard days, but I can look behind me,
Yeah.
like the Ebenezer stone, the reminder, and I can
Mhm.
see that even in all of this insanity
Yeah.
that is living with chronic illness, look at all the beautiful things that God has done and will keep doing as long as I get to be here.
Mm. Yes. Yes. And this has been part of your marriage journey too, I'm sure. And I know we've talked a little bit about it already, but your husband getting you moving sometimes probably when you're like, I can't move. Um, Tell us where you feel like it would be just I want it to be your story, not just for other people too. I want this to be your chance to be ministered to as well as others. That's my idealism, of course. But I really do believe we can get some of both here as you share what you think is you're most passionate to share about your journey of suffering. I think that will bless others. So we would love to hear a bit more about that. It could be relational, personal, just something that you feel like is important for people to know who may not know a lot about chronic illness or suffering.
Yeah, and even so, we can talk to the chronic illness, but the framework of suffering. So, whatever couples are going through, it could be their children, it could be some other issues within their marriage, maybe a violation of trust, and they're choosing to work through it. And
Mm-hmm.
for our family, it's chronic illness. Is
Mm,
that I would say first, and I don't. I want to preface this with we're in the midst of it, and we do not want to pretend to be perfect people,
yeah.
but we're
Yes.
committed people.
Mm,
We're committed to each other, to loving each other, to loving the Lord, to
yeah.
serving, to loving our daughter.
Yeah.
Um, but I would want to tell people like it is hard and it is messy, but what matters, and my husband always says this, is I don't quit. And
Mm,
so it's again going back to that both and living is that it is dealing with chronic illness on a daily basis is hard and messy. And it's going to push you into your weaknesses, me going into my six, if we're going to reference Enneagram. I
yeah.
think for my husband, it pushes him with that. He's a one. So would he go to the four?
Yeah.
Yeah, where
Hmm.
you kind of can withdraw on things.
Yeah.
And so he will become exhausted
Mm,
by my six, when I'm
yeah.
frightened and things. But what is amazing though, and so we have to learn to take breaks,
Mhm.
um, how many times can you talk about something? And then that used to hurt my feelings a lot, but actually at the same time, my husband is a very forward thinking person. And
Mhm.
he's like, that's where hope is. It's out there,
Mhm.
and if we stay here in this muck and mire, could it could overtake us.
Yeah.
So yes, let's lament, but then let's get over it and let's move on. I think also to his military upbringing, his mother and his stepdad, they're very practical, hardworking, forward-thinking people as well. So
Mhm.
it really helps me, like when you think about family systems, which is the
Yeah.
precursor to internal family, is to just kind of see how he functioned within his family and how their
Mm.
family culture is. They're very practical that way. I'm the
Mm.
oddball there because I'm the like, hippie, emotional, artist over there.
Yeah.
I think also too is allowing when you're weak to knowing when to allow your spouse to take the lead.
Mm.
Because when you are so weak and sick, there are going to be times where you just have to trust them. I mean, there were times where I would beg him to take me to the ER and I
Yeah.
would be crying. He'd go, I'm not taking you
Yeah.
because I am watching.
Yeah.
I am watching your vital signs. I know this. And I know right now you are so scared you cannot think straight.
Yeah.
I'm not taking you to the ER. If I do, it's going to be worse. They are going to hospitalize you and you're going to get weaker and you're going to spiral. I
Mm.
will take you to the ER
Yeah.
when we need to.
Yeah.
And that conversation has happened many times.
Mm,
And now I am learning to trust him. And you know what? He's been right every time. And
mm,
when I need to go, he takes me.
yeah.
And, I was just hospitalized a few months ago and he was like, all right, get in the car. We have to go. You know,
Mm,
I think that this is the time to go. And I did need to get some help and some answers and I did get hospitalized. So all this to say, just you have to trust your spouse,
mm,
and dialogue and know that they're human too. And I'm so blessed. We call him the rock of the family because
mm,
that 1-2 is like probably perfectly suited
mm,
within our context to care for me
mm.
because it's that very rational, logical, serving personality.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I think that me as a sufferer, what I've learned is less words, more presence.
Mm,
I think that sometimes people who are suffering acutely, it's, I will be honest, it can be very exhausting to have to talk about it when you already have, or you're feeling really unwell, or you're not in the space for it because everybody means well, but they're giving advice. Have you tried this? Have you tried that?
yeah.
And some of my like most ministered moments is when my friend Natalie, just showed up with stew for me a
Mm,
few weeks ago because I've been so sick. And she just showed up. Here, I made this. You can freeze it. And then she just sat with me.
mm,
And it's the ministry of presence. And I'm not the one to have made that up, but I have learned how true it is.
mm,
Just coming and sitting and looking at that person who's hurting in the eye, just putting your hand on their hand and saying, I'm here.
yeah.
You don't need to say anything. I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm just saying I'm here. And
Mm,
my best friend Candace has done that many times where she's just come and sat with us, especially in the darkness of it. Like literally just sitting on the couch crying and us just sitting there with my husband in silence
oh,
because it's hard. But just knowing that those people are showing up and embodying love, I think that that's a really powerful thing in relationships too.
yeah.
But I think one mistake I made, I can be Pollyannic and idealistic and romantic is, movies and books don't help, is
Hmm.
they make it look like um the one who's suffering is like always going to be doted on and is always going to be lovely and the husband's going to or the wife is coming into the room and you know like this is the meaning of life and everything.
Right.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense? And
of
I want to
course.
just
Yeah.
say those moments do happen.
Yeah.
They don't happen that much.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is like I love you, you love me, this is so hard
Yeah.
and I'm not going anywhere, but I also don't have much in this moment
Yeah.
other than to lay here with you with my head on the pillow and to go to sleep and get up the next day and to do the grind again,
Mm,
you
mm.
know.
Yeah, that's true love. And people romanticize other forms of true love. And you're saying
Yeah.
true love is often very gritty and
Yes.
grounded, and it isn't as flippant or romantic. And that is something
Right.
that we learn across time and seasons if we've had chronic illness or other forms of suffering. And thank you for just naming that. So couples who are living that reality right now
Yes.
don't feel alone, like there's something bad or wrong with them if that's
Yes.
they're in
That
because marriage is long, right?
yes, that's what the way you said that is so
Mm.
perfect and it's something I wish I would have been told,
Mm. Yeah.
or something that could have been seen somewhere in art or in movies or, in the social conversations that we have around grief and suffering and illness.
Yeah, people are trying to do it little by little. I know we're both
Yes.
excited to see truth telling happening more and more with all of us, just knowing, okay, media doesn't have to be picture perfect all the time, or the movies are starting to address it. And we're seeing that things are shifting, but there's still so much glitz and glam that it's hard to really, you have to be looking for it. So I'm really glad people today with us are looking for it and wondering what that's like. And you just spelled it out. It's not always pretty. And there's going to be seasons you and your spouse have to go through both together and also even sometimes divided where you're thinking we're frustrated
Yes.
with each other. Because it's not like marriage conflict goes away. It only
Right.
makes life more stressful. So you have to work through that.
Absolutely. And that is true. I mean, that's the crazy thing about the vacuum of illness is like it doesn't leave anything untouched.
Yeah.
It was catastrophic in its own right, and then it obviously stole our fertility, so it changed our family trajectory. It added far more burden and work to my husband's already like very stressful work life. Then the finances were obviously devastated by my job loss and medical bills. I mean, you can just, the list goes on and on. And so things that already are stressful in a marriage that is kind of powering along, without a trauma,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it intensifies everything. But I will say on the flip side, the gift is you get unbelievable clarity of like what matters, what doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can, you learn how to suffer together. I mean, things that
Mm.
that is a gift because now on the flip side, almost nothing else makes us like we're unflappable in a lot of other
Yeah.
ways. Where
Mm-hmm.
other people are freaking out about something, I believe them. I would have been freaking out about that five
Yeah.
years ago, but
Yeah.
going through top level freak out, am I going to walk again? Am I
Yeah.
going to live?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's our future going to look like? It kind of just there's a gift of perspective, I guess I would like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So everything else that you might have freaked out about before you realize, wow, if we can get through this monster circumstance,
Yeah.
all of these other smaller monsters
Yeah.
are going to be so much more manageable.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. And just beautiful for people to hear that there is a gift, the both and of this process. And like you said, you revealed some of the more difficult sides as well. And I love how you write. I want to go back to that just in terms of, I think that with Stephanie Duncan Smith, my editor from the Enneagram and Marriage, and she's written her own book, as many know now. I feel like one of the things she really gifted us when she came on the podcast, as well as another author, Mara Eller, Ariel Curry, just the gift of journaling, the gift of your own work. Have you found that your own writings and poetry, outside of anything you're doing commercially for others, has that been a gift for you along the way of the suffering journey as well?
It is a total gift, and
Oh,
it's one that I would say is a gift to everybody.
oh, that's,
Because when I would say everybody is creative, because if you talk to adults, 8 out of 10 will say, I'm not creative. And I
mm,
would say, yes, you are.
mhm.
And because we were made that way and you've forgotten. And
Yeah.
I would also say that everybody is a writer.
Mm,
Now, there's all
yeah.
kinds of writers, but
Hmm.
we're made for it. And it has deep therapeutic value,
Mm,
whether you just write for yourself in a journal or, on a scrap piece of paper, or whether you're a prolific, writer who's pumping out a book every year and that you're getting paid to write. Um, Writing is a godsend. And when people say, how did you survive? I say, one, I could write a whole book on it, but
yeah.
here's a short version, faith, love, and poetry. That's
Mm.
how I survived.
Oh, I love-
And I know I'm gonna have to put that on like a mug or something for
Yeah, you
myself.
really are.
But also too from a clinical perspective, and this is what I did my master's thesis on.
Mm.
And now I'm getting to look at it from a different perspective, not as the English major, but as, someone who is studying counseling,
Yeah.
is that the brain on reading and writing, whether we're reading and we're consuming the art that has been created for us, or
Mm.
whether we're creating the work itself, the
Yeah.
brain does slightly different things. But what is amazing about both, so we could speak to poetry,
Yeah.
is that it engages both hemispheres and
Mm.
all the lobes, which almost nothing else can do that.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So,
Wow.
yeah, there's this beautiful book called Reader Come Home,
Mm.
and she's a Harvard neuroscientist, and she unpacks the power of reading.
Wow.
Um, and why I'm bringing this up is because it's adjacent to the writing. And what has been coming out more recently, I would probably say really people are getting curious about it in the past maybe 10 years, because we're moving away from reading and writing as a culture, and we're seeing the devastating effects on the human brain and
Mm.
the
Oh
psyche.
no.
Depression, anxiety is going through the roof.
Oh,
Theory of
yes.
mind. We can't understand that other people have complex inner lives.
Oh my.
People are struggling to have care and empathy for one another. And I would make an argument,
Mm.
and that part of that is because we're losing our abilities to read and write critically.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a lot of Harvard research, among others, and Martha Beck has just talked about this, that when we're creating, so we could talk about poetry, the brain toggles off from its active depression, anxiety, all those biomarkers of when
Mm.
we're in that maelstrom.
Yeah.
It toggles off when we're actually creating something new.
Mm.
And another part of the brain turns on, and it actually will then deafen, stop, mitigate, mute those depressive, anxious experiences.
Mm.
And which makes sense because when you think about the artist, we always have that trope, the tortured artist or creative. No wonder that the human spirit knows, like in our DNA or our internal GPS, that we know we
Mhm.
need to create to save ourselves.
Oh my.
And I know, and it's a beautiful thing. I think it's it calms the amygdala, which is our little fight or flight fawn freeze friend
Yeah.
when we're writing. And also too, I believe it is therapeutic to the hippocampus where our like memories and feelings are.
Mhm.
So, and then on top of that, you get a dopamine hit.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, reading and writing poetry or going into the arts, and that's the science behind it. But I experienced that as an English teacher, and I experienced that. I watched kids calm.
Mm.
They
Mm.
come in like little savages and, oh, we're going to read a little bit of Walt Whitman. Sit down, calm down. I'm going to read to you. And I would just watch the calm
Wow.
over them. And kids then not being able to face certain difficulties, and then a poem would hit them. And this is not just like the library turtleneck, glasses kid like myself.
Yeah.
Even the jocks, even
Yeah.
people who you wouldn't stereotypically think would care about
Mhm.
poetry would be shocked by the
Mm.
end of our unit and go, "Man, Miss Finney, when we were going into this poetry, I just thought I was going to hate every day in this class."
Oh.
And I actually liked it the best. I can't believe it. And so
Oh.
I would see this experientially. And
Yeah.
then to do the research, you're like, this is the answer.
Mm.
And then I want to share one more thing that I was
Oh.
thinking about when I was praying before I came on.
Yes.
Please forgive me.
Oh, I love
But
it.
I've been studying First Samuel. So this is this intersection of faith, the arts, mental health, all of that.
Yes.
And it talked about David, which we all know. David, one, he was like the foretaste of Christ. So, like the hint
Mm.
toward Christ,
Yeah.
like a pre Christ archetype, although we know he's human and he failed, but in his ideal self, he was. But also, he was a poet king. And
Mm.
we know this is the fact. He
Mhm.
sang, he danced, he wrote poetry, and he's the foretaste of Christ.
Mm.
And then you have in John, where he says, in the beginning was the word with a capital W.
Yes.
This gives me goosebumps
Sure. Yeah.
because I want to say to people that poetry is not foreign to you. It
Mm.
is part of the human experience. And then when Christ came, he was embodied poetry.
Mm.
If you think about it, right? Because it's like all the complexity, the beauty, the nuance,
Mm.
the love, the detail, all of the things that I think poetry is at its best,
Mm.
Christ embodies that essence, the mystery. And then, of course, he came, and you couldn't pin him down for black and white answers.
Yeah.
As much as they tried, he was espousing toward an essence, a mystery, an
Mm.
embodiment. And that's for me, I would make the argument that's why he argued or why he used Socratic methods, why he told stories in parables. There's a dialectic there.
Yeah. Yes.
I could talk about this forever, but I
Ooh.
will
Okay.
leave it there.
Oh my gosh, no, the beautiful way you describe
Thank you.
that rhetoric of Christ to let us know that I think people often, especially because we're talking a lot about ones today, I'll say in the one space, when any of us have a one wing arrow space, there's this sense of like, I can't slow down. I'm not allowed to give myself permission to write. And like you named it so well, especially certain tropes among us, young guys doing work, but just even the co-regulation, I can imagine of a Christ and then David and then you with your students. Even a tiny bit me, I'm a seven, so I can be hyper neurotic. But this morning I was teaching my son and his friend who happened to be here, and I'm like, "Oh, you're here, so you're going to teach with us." And he's like, "Dang it." But my son came to me afterwards and was like, I think my friend actually really liked that. And I want to
That's so
say
cool.
that I think it's because when we're working hard, I have to work a little harder to co-regulate from that peaceful space. When we have something to give in that way, I think that people are wanting to attune what do you have? And what you have and what Christ has offered is, like you said, this slowing down, reflecting space
Yes.
that people are desperate for. And I love how you named what Jonathan Haidt is trying to teach us in his book about the
Oh,
ego
yes, I love him.
generation. Me too.
Yes,
Oh my
great
gosh.
reference.
And just really allowing us to say, let's us too put our phones down and go back to writing. You are allowed. I don't care if your one is beating your door down and saying you can't, you have to do more. You actually need to take some time or space. And for me, even on the busy days, I always take at least 5 minutes to pound something out. And that is essential. So I didn't know all the research behind it. And then the Christian analogies. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I've been camping out on that stuff because my first book of Wings and Dirt is out wherever books are
Mm.
sold, and then Exalted Ground, my follow-up book of poetry, will hopefully be coming out this April. But then I have a nonfiction project. You're the first that I'm sharing this with. I can't share details, but I will
Okay.
say that what I am waxing poetic about with you right now
Yeah.
might be hinting towards something of a project that I'm going to start working
So
on.
excited. Okay, you came on the right podcast. English literature plus psychology,
I know.
research. Like we love you over here. Everyone who listens here loves those things. So we're just like, yeah, we can't wait
I
for your next book and your next book.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful that Tanner connected us. And when I was looking into you and listening and kind of geeking out in your English background and then the counseling, and I was like, no wonder Tanner
Put us
told
together.
me because I think that we are cut from a very similar cloth.
Me too. I was so excited that you could come. And oh my gosh. Okay, well, I know you have been so kind to give us all this time and energy, which is so precious. Do you have time to do a little lightning round fun with us before
I
we?
would love to.
Okay, let's
Thank
do
you.
that. And then we'll let people also hear where they can find you. So just creative connections, a few questions. So poetry or prose for expressing love?
Poetry.
We should have known. Okay,
Yeah.
morning pages for writing or evening reflection?
Okay. So evening reflections, and even if I could push it further, midnight pages. I don't know what happens
Ooh.
at the witching hour, but the stuff that I get if I stay up late is good stuff.
Oh, yes, 100%. Love that and receive that. Okay, nature walks or cozy reading corners?
You are killing me with this one. You
That's
know
how.
what though? I At the end of the day, the nature walk, because that is God's
Hmm.
first creation. And then everything we make
Oh,
is a reflection of that.
that's a beautiful way to say that and why we can't give
Yeah.
that up. Oh my.
Yeah.
Also love the word nature walks because my dad with the English lit, he always called them
Yes.
nature walks and now people call it hiking and I never realized they were the same thing. So, okay. So sharing art or creating together?
Creating together. And that is something I've come to learn, especially that's a key component of the way back to ourselves, which is radical belonging and
Yeah.
the idea that the creative, and none of us are made to be alone, but certainly not the creative, because we do think that we should be alone.
Yes.
And then we will only share something when it's excellent. And we've been teaching in the way back to ourselves that's not the case.
Mm.
Bring the crumbs that you have
Mm.
and watch them get multiplied in community.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. It kind of goes with the failing forward concept, but you've given it more legs when you add for the arts community because there is even a deeper dive of self-criticism and loathing in
Oh,
anyone who does
absolutely.
artistic work. So thank you. Oh my gosh. And that's, yeah. So we're going to give the reference of where you guys can find her for this too. And I want that as well. Okay. So silent understanding or deep discussion.
Discussion.
It's good. Oh my gosh. You're the second nine who said this recently. And I, again, so encouraged that you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we can dig deep.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when we're awake to ourselves.
Yes. Yes. That's the key. And then last, structured practice or spontaneous expression.
Okay, so that's another hard one. I would say
Yeah.
spontaneous, but then I think that when the spontaneity comes, when the creativity gods, and I use that loosely,
Yeah.
strike, or you have a big idea, you have to have the structured practice to make it come to life.
Mm,
So for me, it's like I tell my writers and creatives, be attuned, but then be ready to do the work when that lightning bolt comes.
good. Yes. And I really want to echo that even the ones you would think ones are always like, okay, yes, absolute details, but sometimes because they're moving fast, I even want to say it to them, like, take a deep breath. It's worth going back to because
Absolutely.
books need hundreds, if not thousands, of revisions, and you're worth it. And going back for that structured practice is great. But I love how you're like, let's catch it while we've got it too, right?
Yes.
Well, you're teaching us that and so much more on your blog and your pages. So tell us where everyone can find you, get connected with you, and find your beautiful books too.
Thank you. So the most important thing to me is actually our community, the way back to ourselves.com. Well, that's what the number two. So the way back to ourselves.com, that's kind of the hub of everything. So for me, I'm a member of a community first, and I think that that is carried on from my public servant years. And then I also, after being a teacher and a servant, I am a avid creative. And so I do have my book of Wings and Dirt. It's available like on Amazon, signed copies on the website at thewaybacktourselves.com. It's wherever books are sold online. And then, like I said, Exalted Ground is hopefully going to come out in April. So that will be the same thing. And then the way back to ourselves will be the Instagram where we're the most active, and then also where we're very active, and it's more of my personal offshoot is the Substack. So the Substack, I do absolutely talk about the community, but if you're wanting to connect with me on more of a personal basis and see some of my personal work and essays as well, that's
Oh,
at the Substack. So I call that one My Way Back. So it's like an offshoot
love that.
of the way back to ourselves, which is a community of faithful creatives and leaders. And then we have a podcast that we wrapped the first season, and then we have an offshoot podcast. So the
Awesome.
Way Back podcast, and then we have the Poetry Corner, which some of our community members, Edward Holmes and Deidre Brayley, put together for our literary journal. So our submissions
Wow.
are open now. I don't know when this is going to come out. So I should say they're open February 1st to March 1st
Yes,
for
this
an
is
April
now. Yes.
2025 publication. And it's exciting because we're moving to print as well as digital now.
Oh
So it'll
my
be free online, and then we'll also have a print version of it for sale. So
Oh my goodness. All these things, I only knew about some of them. I love that you just went through them all. They're all in the show notes. Now we'll
thank
add them
you.
all. And this
Thank you.
is so beautiful. This is very creative, and I don't put it past you as a nine for being able to do all of this. Seriously, guys, nines can encompass so much. It's just like such a gifted personality. They all are, but this is your particular gifts, and you're sharing them wholeheartedly with us. So we can't thank you enough, Kimberly. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
joining today.
I want to thank you for your warmth
Oh,
and your energy. And I am really enjoying your podcast and just the generosity that you give to your guests. So thank you so much.
so much. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, thank you.